Good evening. My name is Kirill Gerstein, and you've tuned into Kirill Gerstein Invites, an online seminar forum hosted by Kronberg Academy. And I'm delighted that today, as our guest, we have Sir Antonio Pappano, the great conductor, music director at Royal Opera House, Covent Garden in London, music director of Santa Cecilia Orchestra in Rome. One doesn't need to introduce Tony, as he kindly allows to call him. And I think you should now be able to see him on your screens. Hi, Tony. Good evening.
Hi, Kirill. Thank you so much for this invite. I really appreciate it. And to talk about something I love so much.
Well, it's wonderful to have this chance to talk to you, as you are really perhaps more than ever, or very particularly engrossed in this opera now, in La Fanciulla del West of Puccini. And it is an opera that we know is somehow at times overshadowed by his more popular works, and that's possibly something that we'll touch. And you yourself told me recently in a conversation that it isn't quite like anything else of Puccini, and obviously want to hear the elaborations of that. On a personal note, I can say that it was one of the most amazing performances of anything I've attended when I had the fortune to hear you conduct this at the Staatsoper Berlin recently. And I think there is one more performance. So if anybody is joining us from Berlin, get your ticket as soon as possible. And if you Google on YouTube, you will find the video that I found of the broadcast. Who knows how allowed it is, but wow, it's possible. Do watch it. But in any case, let's talk about Puccini, and let's talk about this very special work.
This piece was premiered at the Metropolitan Opera. Understandable, an American theme, 1910. So several years had passed since the last opera, Madame Butterfly, which was premiered disastrously in 1904 at La Scala, but then a few months later, re-premiered in a revised version in Brescia, and then it was a big success. But you see, 1904 to 1910, this is typically Puccini. First of all, to find the subject, the hell he put the librettist through to get everything the way he wanted. the streamlining, the reducing everything to the essentials is something that followed him throughout his career. Now, you said that this opera is like no other, but there are hints of the road he was going to take in the operas that preceded, in particular, Madame Butterfly, I would say. What do I mean by that? Well, we know that Puccini, in his operas, was fascinated with anything that was somehow foreign to the European culture. And of course, Madame Butterfly is the prime example. But we have not only that, we have Turandot as ancient China, mythical China, but China nonetheless, and a musical language that in both cases, with Japan and China, trying to find a musical language that conveys the culture of the place. Now, with the West of the Girl of the Golden West, Puccini did the same thing. There are certain folk songs that he took and used. There's definitely an accent on the pentatonic scale. For those of you who don't know what the pentatonic scale is, that's the 5-note scale. And he uses melodies or chords. You can hear the Far West in that music somehow already. You hear the slow trot of the horse in that music. But this looking for exotic places, because he's searching for a musical language that somehow was starting to exhaust itself. He was not convinced that he could go any further with the lush melodies of La Bohème, of Tosca, and with and Manon Lescaut, of course, his first big success, which has a Wagnerian tinge. The other operas are more personal to him as an Italian, but he goes outside of Europe to find the inspiration. And this is the key. The other thing is that he changes musical language. The building blocks of his other operas tended to be melody with dramatic thrust and declamation, but melody most of all. But you can't say that about La Fanciulla del West. Very interesting. The building blocks actually are the whole tone scale. Now we heard that introduction in the little bit of video that we saw to introduce this session. But if I play slowly the opening, you'll hear what I mean. The whole tone scale is this, basically. And if that's the cliche of the whole tone scale, the kind of dreamy. Listen how Puccini uses the idea of the whole tone scale and chords, harmonizing each note of that scale to create, well, something that is very, very personal and very strange, and yet somehow speaks of adventure, of violence, and even of redemption. And I'll go into that in a minute. But let me tell you, first of all, where we are in terms of place. Where it's 1849, around there, and it's the gold rush in California, near Monterey, in the mountains, and with the struggles of the elements, of going against the elements, the snow, the cold, the incredible hard work to try to chip gold from the stone, and all the while suffering perhaps most of all from homesickness. There's a guy in this group of miners who's from Cornwall, And he just, at a certain point, goes crazy, can't take it anymore. So this nostalgia, homesickness, violence, adventure, the new, the you can make it rich, these are somehow very American qualities. Let me go back to that whole tone scale that I talked about and the chording. So it starts with a big flourish, and here are the chords. Now, this in the opera is performed as so. Very tempestuous, allegro non troppo, but a rather quick metronome mark. It's followed by the melody in the second stave, from the last bar. Another version of the whole tone scale. And this melody, this restless melody, it turns on itself, but then it's aspirational. It's reaching for something, and this reaching for something, for gold, for love, for redemption. It's fascinating because it comes back over and over again, and in different guises and in different situations. And in this way, it is a leitmotif, as Wagner would have called it, something that reminds us of a person, a place, an idea, or a dramatic situation. And of course, I spoke also of using melodies, folk melodies, and in the case of the prelude, a dance, the cakewalk. This is on the bottom of the second page. So it's, and this comes in a very fiery version. Has with brass blazing, and this cakewalk is associated with many different things. One of the heroes, Ramirez, the Mexican bandit, but it's also with the general atmosphere of almost forced joy, I would call it, because the hardship is just very near to unbearable. This morphs into something a little gentler, and the workers are coming home from the mines, and they're getting ready to go to the tavern, the polka. And we hear this. Beautiful harmony changes later. Now, what's happening here? Do you hear the repetition? One of the building blocks that Puccini is using, and what I spoke about before, are what we would today call grooves or riffs. Dee-ding, da-dum, da-ding, da-dum, dee-ding, back and forth, to lull us into a situation, into a place, into an atmosphere. And so almost a hypnotic device. And I mean, Madame Butterfly in Suzuki's Prayer in Act 2. We hear a couple of chords, an ostinato figure, a repeated figure, repeated over and over again that lulls us. We also get melody, sorry. Static harmony with a compelling melody. That's Madame Butterfly. Here, this is a little simpler. And listen how he uses open fifths. So the other thing that you will notice is parallelism. There's a tremendous amount of parallel motion, even at the beginning, the very beginning. This parallelism, which is not new to Puccini. I mean, there's no question. What are you going to say now? Well, where does it come from? Well, you don't have to look very, very far for the developments. I mean, of Mr. Debussy. Puccini was extremely aware of everything that was going on. He went to see the premiere of Strauss's Salome in 1905 in Dresden, and he knew who Stravinsky was. He was a great Wagnerite, and of course he knew about the developments, the musical developments that Debussy was working on. And you hear these influences everywhere in this score, and yet somehow, and I don't know how he does it, he remains Italian to the core. You can say, oh yes, that's a Debussy influence, but somehow he always makes it his own. Similar to composers like Elgar. Elgar, was tremendously influenced by Wagner, by Schumann, by Strauss, of course, and yet somehow it always sounds like Elgar. Puccini had that ability to steal, to beg, borrow, and steal, but somehow integrate things. And of course, the question that you'll ask is, well, how with these short riffs, these grooves, these back and forths of chords, how does he somehow stitch it all together? Well, as Wagner did before him, the one leitmotif morphs into another. We get a snatch of melody here on page 5. That is typically Puccini of old. That could be from any of his operas. But then we're back. Use of fourths here and fifths with the pentatonic chord. I play again. yes, it's melodic, but look at the bass and look at the parallelism. So melody, Puccinian melody, Mediterranean melody, if you like, but with and this, all these devices, if you like, are somehow seamlessly stitched together. It's just absolutely incredible. And you put this together with just an absolutely kaleidoscopically colorful orchestration, and you have the makings of a musical setting, which is, I think, unique. The Far West is, you know, as we know it, as modern people, you know, we've seen all the Westerns, and, you know, we associate with John Wayne and Gary Cooper and Randolph Scott and, you know, even Dean Martin and Lee Marvin and Burt Lancaster, but all these guys, and it's so replete with so many cliches, and yet those cliches were not in place when Puccini wrote this piece. There were ideas, there were folk songs, there were things around that conjured maybe the idea of the place, but it's us modern people who have all this baggage of what we think a Western should be and it shouldn't be. What I think this opera is successful at creating is, besides the three main characters, it is the atmosphere of hardship and brotherhood, and family. But in a family, you have brawls and fights and misunderstanding, and that's all there, and that makes it very, very human, and therefore the story is so winning. If I have to admit, quite improbable. The idea is that these miners, they've set up huts and houses around, centered around a tavern run by the only woman in town, Minnie. And of course, she's a nature girl. What is she doing out there in this place? But she has a fire and an air of defiance and strength, hiding an incredible femininity and sensitivity and loveliness that, of course, was manna to Puccini, because he was so famous, so obsessed with the female character. And she is one of the great creations. He creates one of the greatest entrances for her, like he does for all his prima donnas. And, you know, it's a real theatrical tour de force, and not gentle like Mimi at all, you know. We don't get any of that from her, or very little of it. We get she's an extremely passionate and, yeah, nature woman somehow. It's just amazing.
I think actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think I might be able to cue us up in the video to that first entrance. Let's see if I'm completely off. Coming up, no?
Bello che fai che guardi. L'Inniflio colpi lungo il torrente nero dal mio paese ce ne son tanti. Oh, grazie già. È passato pel campo oggi un merciaio di San Francisco. Aveva trine nostri. Questo è per voi.
It's so engrossing. It's a shame to turn it off, but I'll post the link for those that aren't fortunate enough to see it live. It's an incredible appearance.
And yes, it is preceded by so many things happening. I want to talk about, I'll talk about the entrance of Mini in a second, but I do want to talk about the element of sentimentality. Sentimentality is something that Puccini was very, very careful to skirt, always just shy of sentimentality. He was very interested in sentiment. But here, he uses pure sentimentality to create a reaction, a reaction of a total breakdown in one of the characters because of what I said earlier on, this nostalgia and homesickness. And he uses a melody sung by a traveling minstrel. This is a harp backstage accompanying with paper stuck in the between the strings, so it sounds like a banjo. I don't know why he didn't use a banjo, but the effect is very new. But the melody is this. And of course, he is playing on the feelings of these guys because he talks about their parents. He's saying, what are my parents doing back home? And this, of course, brings everybody to tears. And but it's a device. It's a dramaturgical necessity. I mean, this tune then is dressed up becoming an ensemble. Tune coming back. Page 28. Do you see how that it's building up and somehow it's always aspirational, trying to get to a feeling, trying to find the the emotion, but always rising. And then, but the melody ultimately will droop. This is what brings the tears. This is what brings the sadness. The entrance of Minnie, first of all, is preceded by a card game that turns into a brawl because one of the characters, Sid, cheats. The name of Minnie comes up, and we see and hear how everybody is just so in love with her. It's, well, how could it be otherwise, really? I mean, she's the only woman there, except for her maidservant, the native American, Walkley. But Minnie is it. And she's beautiful, and she's wonderful, and she's warm. But the sheriff, and he's a very, very important character. His name is Jack Rance. He sort of is the boss of this little township here. And when the name of Minnie is brought up, he says, soon to be Mrs. Rance. Now, all of the characters have designs on Minnie. They all want to marry her, and they all want her to be theirs. But Sonora, one of the other main characters, takes great offense at this and starts a very aggressive fight. And it's the musical building blocks on page 54 of the piano score are, again, whole tone based. It's the woodwinds and the strings and horns. So. See how the mixed whole tone chords laid one on top of another. It's fantastic color and thrusting melody. And we go to another key. And this goes very, very quickly. It's very aggressive. Yeah, listen to this. Real concerto of whole tone scales, which finishes, strangely enough, with a chromatic fanfare, and finishing on D. And she breaks in when she hears all this disturbance, and very angrily, and these lush major ninth chords. Listen to this. Hello, Minnie. Just amazing. Now, this is a great place to point something else out. The experimentation with harmony. I mean, the Puccini that we know, it's very diatonic harmony, yes. That's from Tosca, or if we look a little further on page 60, we get third related chords. In other words, chords that go up or down by a third, and they create a very, very, very special sound world. Listen to this. It's A minor going to F sharp. F sharp going to E flat. Resolving back to C major. There's an undeniable sensuality, even though actually she's berating them, she's scolding them for starting this fight. But the music around her, the musical environment is so warm, so winning, so absolutely simpatica, you know, sympathetic. She just is, and yet she's strong. Just fantastic. Of course, you saw in the video how they all try to calm her down and make nice with her. Another thing Puccini does just after that, on page 61, is when they're saying, "No, Mini, I'm sorry, we you know, it was getting late and you weren't here, and we got bored and we started." But he uses the pedal, in other words, a note in the bass that stays always the same despite the change of harmony. See the C. And because the bass is not moving, and you heard the parallelism again, did you? Puccini and his fourths somehow creating the exotic world. But a pedal bass, a bass that stays absolutely static, somehow suspends us because the harmony is not really moving. It keeps us, because this is a little, an interlude, he keeps us somehow with our feet above the water, if you like, and before he brings us down again. It's a fantastic device, and he uses it more and more in his operas going on. It sounds terribly technical as I'm speaking, but I'm fascinated by it because of how it basically reinvented him. These choices that he made reinvented him, gave him new avenues to explore, and was the right road for him to take to conjure up this West of the gold rush era.
It's brilliant. No, it's please don't be shy about being specific, and I'll ask you about being specific later. The story that you recently told me about, but I think this is so fascinating to see how these things materialize out of specifics.
I told you that the sheriff thinks that he really has, shall we say, the winning hand with Mini. But this is his music. And it tells you everything about him. Page 82 in the piano score. And again, chords based on the whole tone scale. Pedal A. He's a brooding type. He's bitter. He's unhappy. He's unhappy in his marriage. He loves Minnie, but and he tells her so just now. Ti voglio bene, Minnie. And a very strange duet. I said very strange because the musical language is quite arid. Mainly unison in the orchestra. And there's pentatonic. And as if, I mean, he says, I'll give you $1,000 for a kiss. It's crazy idea, such a lack of class, but somehow he's desperate. And the music is kind of empty. It has some harmonic felicities. The bottom of page 83. And she says, well, what about your wife? What will your wife say? It's very, very clever. But then listen again. Her heart's certainly not in it at all. And this provokes his aria, which is one of the most fascinating pieces, and shows, in a way, sadly, why this opera is not as popular as the other operas. It doesn't have those show-stopping arias, and the arias that it does have are, they're almost as if they're actors' monologues. And this one of his, where he tells her that I've left my home, I've left my place in the mountains, and I don't have any regrets, Minnie. Not a one. Nobody's ever loved me, and I've never loved anybody. In my heart of a gambler, bitter, poisoned, that laughs at love and at destiny. I came to this place attracted by the fascination of the gold. But yet now for a kiss from you, I would throw it all away, all his treasure.
Should we look a little bit at this? Because I think I have this queued up where he sings I Love You, Minnie. Should we show a little bit?
Right.
Let's try.
Right.
Non puoi star qui sola, ti sposo. Se tu lo vuoi, mai più mi rivedrà. Renzi, basta, basta, prendete, vivo sola così, o lo sapete perché così mi piace. Siete in collera, Renz, perché? son partito e là dai monti sopra un altro mare. Non un rimpianto Minni ha seguito, non un rimpianto vi poteva lasciare. Nessuno mai m'amò, nessuno amato, nessuna cosa mai mi fece piacere. Chiudo nel petto un cuor mi scazziere, amaro avvelenato, che ride dell'amore e del destino. Mi son messo in cammino, attratto sol dal fascino dell'oro, e questo il solo che non m'ha ingannato. Or che bacio fu, getto un tesoro.
L'amore è un'altra cosa.
Poesia.
Poesia.
It's a wonderful Michael Folle and Anya Kampe as Jack Rance and Mimi, respectively. And that aria that he just sang, it's not the friendliest piece of music in the world. And let me give you an idea as to why. You hear the repetition. So there was some development there, but listen again. That's just a transposition. Surprise. Again, repetition. I've heard that melody before. Etc., etc. And you see, but with each layer of text, the inner intensity of the acted and sung performance becomes ever so much more intense with every repetition. And it's like hammering something home, or kneading some dough. You know, you're working it, you're working the subject, if you like. And this was just the right approach for this character, who was just full of bile and would somehow is sort of has a hair-trigger temper and will be violent at any moment, seeks revenge, and can be absolutely cruel, and yet is in love. So these contradictory things are working inside him. And therefore, though it's certainly not it's certainly not Visi d'arte, but it's right for what it is and what's needed. And I think Puccini showed incredible courage by doing this. Surely in his heart of hearts, he knew that this wouldn't bring him the success, the same kind of success, at least in Europe. And that's how it turned out. Now, Minnie comes back with an aria of her own, which is based on a riff. She tells a story of her childhood growing up, and she describes her mother and her father and the relationship between the two of them. And we hear this constant somehow conjuring up a faraway time. But Puccini saves this, perhaps on page 91, this perhaps very, very simple and primitive, if you like, accompaniment with this. They loved each other so much. So very simple harmonies. That's the Puccini we know and love, but it's just a snippet you hear. My parents loved each other so much, and oh, if I would find a man that perhaps I could love, she says. The music comes down for that. This phrase also contains a high C, as you will notice, just on the second system. And it's one of the most difficult notes to sing ever. The approach to high notes in the role of Minnie is ever so cruel. I mean, Puccini was well known for being extremely masochistic with his prima donnas, but this one takes the cake. She just has to launch it. And yeah, it's one of a series of very problematic high notes in the piece. That's just by the by. And the cakewalk comes back. And we get to meet the tenor. And much richer palette harmonically. Okay, so this tenor, whose name is Ramirez, he's the Mexican bandit, but Minnie doesn't know this. She knows him as Dick Johnson, a young gentleman who she met back in Monterey a while back, and somehow there was a chemistry between them, and she remembers him. Now, he's a fascinating character. He's the tenor, but there's a lot more to him than meets the eye. He has a backstory, which we get to know in Act 2. His father, who was a bandit, died 6 months ago, and he's having to take up this life. That's the only life he's known, was to be a bandit. But he says, since he met her, things have changed. And Of course, he didn't know that he was going to find her here, because he's with a group of other bandits, and they're planning to steal the gold that is surely hidden somewhere, either in the tavern, the gold that has been collected through the mining. Becomes very complicated, of course, because the baritone, the sheriff, is in love with Minnie, and the tenor remembers this chemistry. And in fact, when he walks in, they see each other, and all of a sudden that is inflamed again. And so a much needed flamboyance to the music and revitalization of the score comes into the picture. And there's conversation. There's again the grooves. Again, that Western feel, you hear it. So again, text can be put on top of that, and you get the most natural conversation possible.
I think I have the place where he enters, if we want to show that for a second. Let's see here.
La ragazza del campo. Nessun straniero può entrare a campo. Certo, voi sbagliaste sentiero. Per caso andavate a trovare Nina Micelforena.
Renz!
Ferma il cavallo qualche momento appena per riposare di e al caso tentare un baccanà giocare e il vostro nome
Forse che qui si sa il nome della gente.
Canzon e poi vengo da Sacramento
Benvenuto fra noi Janson di Sacramento.
Grazie. Vi ricordate di me?
Sì, se anche voi mi ricordate.
E come non potrei, fu pel sentiero che mena a Monterrey.
Fu nel torrone, offristi un ramo di gelsomino.
E poi vi dissi, andiamo a coglier le more.
Ma io non venni.
È vero.
Ricordate, signori,
Come adesso?
io ripresi il cammino. Voi dicevate, non ricordo più.
Sì, te lo ricordate. Dissi che da quell'ora
Non avreste scordato.
ne l'ho scordato mai, mai, mai.
Quanto tempo sperai di rivedervi.
There's no place one wants to stop.
There's you see the panache with which Puccini treats the entrance of the tenor. It's brilliant because it's just at a point in the act where we don't really know where it's going to go from there, you know, and somehow this revitalization, which I spoke about before, happens in such a convincing way, very Straussian in its orchestration, bold harmonic invasions into new territories, quite different from these little grooves that I talk about, these riffs, this repetition, sort of using some of Puccini's original language from years before. But he will always surprise you and always mix it up. So the couple dance together, and they dance to this melody. It's a waltz tune, and it's accompanied very simply, very dryly. It's lovely scene, very, very simply set. The minors.
Which page is this?
And this is on page 107. And the importance of this melody is not only its simplicity and the fact that all the minors notice this electricity between the two main characters, the soprano and the tenor. But this then becomes the basis for the love duet, which starts on page 120. I say love duet. This is all in its somehow initial stages. On page 120, rehearsal 96. Now, what can one say about that melody? Well, several things. First of all, the important thing is, remember a while ago I spoke about the pedal note, a note that is constant through changes of harmony. You hear that A. Another thing is the murmuring strings, which is very Wagnerian. So that's from Siegfried, the forest murmurs, a murmuring figure, and his use of subtle touches of color on the top of page 121, using suspension. These very tight intervals. A moment of diatonic harmony. how he's dressed up that simple tune, taking it into another key, using suspensions, using the pedal tone, using the murmuring, and then creating this environment for burgeoning love. And it's, you know, the intimacy of it is just absolutely winning. On page 123, she says, I have not yet had my first kiss. And this will be on the third system. She goes up to a high note. So very interestingly harmonized. Finally changes the bass. And the word kiss. I've not given my first kiss. The feeling of regret and melancholia on that. This spurs him on. You see, again, the A is always there in the bass. It's fantastic. It's very, very simple. And yet somehow we are feeling the waves. The closeness is getting more intense between the two of them. I want to point out one figure, one motive that is so crucial in this opera. That's on page 126. And it's this on the second system. This leaping figure. Defiance, this it's amazing, because to me, this belongs to like the text that Leonora has as Fidelio in Beethoven's opera. Ich habe Mut und Kraft. I have courage and strength to face whatever is to be faced. And this is her visiting card, if you like. It leaps, it defies, and we hear it now for the rest of the opera over and over again, as she gains confidence in her womanhood. It will be revealed now to her as she becomes closer and closer to Johnson.
I think here's the moment where she sings about the kiss, if I have queued it up correctly. I just stopped it there shamelessly.
There there are so many musical gestures in this scene. There's her innocence and her questions about life. She says that I'm a poor girl. This is page 128. She uses the word fanciulla. She wants to touch the sky. On page 129, she says, I'm sort of burning with desire. See those splashes of color, fantastic. If I can be near to you. And Puccini knows a good melody when he has it, so he has to bring it back. But set quite differently this time. It's very interesting, this last phrase on page 130, the fourth system, because this is the phrase that supposedly, controversially, Andrew Lloyd Webber was to have stolen, and he was settled out of court with the Puccini Foundation, but this appeared in his musical, The Phantom. Puccini always wins when it comes to melody. And you see how we've heard the same melody. We heard it like this. Then we heard it like this. Now we're hearing it like this. So it just takes a master of transformation, of development, of knowing what to do with even simple materials. I mean, the melody is not the greatest melody I've heard in the world, but it's one of the greatest accompaniments I've heard in the world, you know, and harmonizations. It's really beautiful. And when he's looking for more tenderness, he chooses exactly the right harmonies and the right environment orchestrally for it. It's just absolutely beautiful. And this duet will develop because they really tell things about each other. And one of the things that we find out is this hardship that I spoke about right from the beginning, and how she describes it. Bottom of page 135 starts a section. Sounds like Gershwin, doesn't it? really hear the pain. Page 137 now. She says she's there to protect these men, and if anybody wants to steal the gold, they'll have to get by me as I hold, and she holds up the gun. And it's a fantastic picture of the strong woman. In fact, the orchestra explosively expresses this. Page 138. The whole tone scale, whole tone chords. Oh, wait a minute, what did we hear there? Little Tristan. And that restless theme that appeared in the prelude. Etc. This aspirational theme that goes up. And this duet is extremely successful, but it's a very private affair. It's somehow not meant to be sold to the audience. And but it is so intimate that she invites him to come to her house to continue this conversation. And we get on the bottom of page 140, back and forth between C major and B flat major. And this goes on and on a little bit, just again, creating almost a dream world. And on page 145 is the ribbon on this heavenly scene. Now, do you remember this music we heard the first time was at her entrance, but here we hear the most such gentle treatment. And he says she has the face of an angel. And if you turn the page, we get this incredible glissando from the harp. We get that sequence of chords that you heard before, these third related chords. She repeats his words, un viso d'angelo. After she utters that, the orchestra and it just hovers on this C major 9 chord. And it's like a big question mark, to be continued.
I think I have this actually queued up. We can see this very end of the scene of the act.
ciò che avremmo potuto essere, io lo comprendo, ora che vi guardo, Minni.
Davvero? Ma che vale?
Siete una d'anima buona e avete un
Bravi.
I don't believe we've been speaking for an hour and a half, and we're only at the first act.
Well, nobody's leaving, and I think we are wrapped in attention. I am. So as long as you have patience, because now it's about what happens next.
Well, he comes to visit her, and she, at the beginning of Act 2, has this wonderfully intimate and almost funny scene of herself trying to get ready, and with all the nervosity, which is portrayed in this music. And it's this is the most Debussy-like of the music that I know. Such an obvious use of the whole tone scale, but not only. La Mer. Quite something that always surprises me, I have to say. And the scene is very well written. We meet this lady servant that she has, Wokley, and she sings a lullaby to her baby, and then Minnie tries on shoes and they're too tight for her. And again, this is quite light material. The shoes are too tight, stretta. But again, I've said it already many times today, Puccini will all bring back his former self when needed, just to break the pattern of innovation or newness. He just gives you something sublime, melodically speaking. And that is on page 158 in the third system. She says, I want to dress myself as if it were a feast day, from head to toe. And she says, I'm actually not that ugly. I put even perfume. You see, even these gloves, I haven't worn them for over a year. Maybe would it be too elegant? But the melody is just ravishing. Listen. Again, the trademark bass note pedal. With a little suspension as she admires herself in the mirror. The melody is almost Tchaikovsky in its sequential nature. Again. And then her defiance theme. And he changes the orchestration. Now, it's not apparent in the piano score, but he uses harmonics in the strings. And it creates the most ravishing sound imaginable. He enters, and there's this beautiful conversational music between them. But of course, on page 163, the tune. This time the cellos. Violas. Different. Different accompaniment this time, and going into new territory. You see how the musicals came about after this, the hit tune, which will be repeated over and over again. This is this in embryonic form. It's just there. Now you see how through little surprise, little invasions of different harmonies. He creates wondrous new aspects to the same material, but then he will bring the tune back, again, reorchestrated in the violins this time, up high, absolutely traditionally Puccinian, if you like. But then, similarly, he needs to go back to the new type of writing. If you look at page 167, where she basically tells him a little bit more about herself, how she has a pony, and the music is, well, here's absolutely a riff in the accompaniments. It's a pedal note, which is the F sharp, which repeats all the time. And then we get that in a high octave, the celeste and the harp. And the arpeggio is played by solo violin. And it repeats ad nauseum while she sings. And a very, very simple melody. And the vivaciousness and the happiness of her life. She's accepted where she is, what she is, and she's somehow happy. And this, again, creating a musical foundation, a carpet, an idea, and let the singer and the text put over the detail somehow. And the orchestra, the audience will be lulled into concentrating somehow on what the singer is saying, and not by the seductive nature of the melody. You see, so Puccini was making it more difficult for himself, at the same time trying to get greater clarity for how to put over the text. Now, I explained to you that the pedal note, that the viola reiterates this note, the solo violin has this arpeggio, and then the celeste and the harp have this little figure, this little gesture. It's pretty sophisticated, very chamber music-like. So it's simplicity, but glittering simplicity, shall we say, $1 million simplicity. And only Puccini could somehow put across and invent. The duet becomes ever more intimate and ravishing, and we get what I call something on page 175, something that becomes very much like movie music. And this is a rehearsal 24. And we have this figure. Now, what could be more banal? But it's getting late, they're getting tired, and it's time to go to sleep. And there's even a bar at the end of the page with, I'm counting them, 4 fermatas. Where Johnson is lighting a cigar, and that takes time, and Johnson goes towards Minnie, trying to embrace her. And I'm supposed, as the conductor, I'm supposed to wait. No, I did that too fast, sorry. 1 fermata, 2 fermatas, 3 fermatas. And then the music goes on. See how the chords descend and almost fall asleep, but before that, he wants a kiss. Very very sexy music indeed. Finally, she relents. And on page 179, this restless figure from the prelude comes back, and this is for her this time. You hear the chords, the whole tone chords over and over again. And this figure now, so then it resolves diatonically to C sharp minor.
We can. I think I can show this.
Yes.
This
Another cruel high C. Do you see it there on the page?
Here we can watch it for a second.
Yeah, that's really hot stuff, actually, isn't it?
Amazing.
Well, you know, of course, after Tristan and Isolde, a composer like Puccini, I mean, he tried, of course, valiantly in Madame Butterfly. The duet that ends Act 1 is a brilliant example of a complete scene, a love duet as a scene. And this is, of course, trying to achieve that which Wagner achieved. I mean, no Italian composer can write a love scene that's going to last 45 minutes as Wagner could do. That's impossible. The Italians need to get to it a little bit sooner somehow. But again, here you have this try, and it's much more simple. It's perhaps more earthbound, more passionate in that kind of carnal and less philosophical way. But it is two people embracing each other in every way, and it's absolutely beautiful. The duet climaxes in such a big, bold fashion. We get a melody that was introduced before, earlier on, in simple terms. Pentatonic melody, that then on page 186 becomes this. and here we have the Tristanesque. These sighing figures that are the definition of that Wagnerian impulse and restlessness, if you like. The scene becomes more intimate. They go to sleep. Page 193. The wind howls. Lots of whole tone scales. The kiss music comes back at page 195. And then we hear voices from outside. And they're looking for the bandit. And it seems that they think he's there with Minnie. Somehow everything leads there. And she defies them all the way. It is a very tense interrogation scene where they all ask questions of her, page 202. And it's, again, a very simple riff. And it's very unusual because on the third beat, it says un po' trattenuto l'ultimo quarto. And this means that the last beat of the bar is just held back a little bit as they try to catch her in a lie. And she's defiant. So it's, again, two chords, but one bass note. Again, that device he uses over and over again. In fact, this whole scene has one bass note until page 204, where she breaks it. And something there happens. Who told you he was a bandit? This Dick Johnson. Basically, what they're revealing to her is that this person that she's crazy about is actually the bandit, Ramirez. Who told you he was? And Rance strategically and cleverly says, his woman. His woman? What do you mean? There's this woman, a woman who, her name is Nina Michel Torena. And somehow all the men know who she is, if you get my drift. And Rance says on page 205, she's his lover. And leaves that hanging in the air. Of course, Minnie puts on a good face, throws everybody out. Good night. But when she comes back, and she's hidden Johnson in the cabin somewhere, and she says, "Come out now, come out thou." That, which is the music of the kiss, becomes now poison. Da 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 da. And we get this music inspired by Tristan and Isolde, the second act. That's exactly Tristan and Isolde. And we get this new melody. Where she's lost all trust and hope in him. And she just wants nothing more to do with him. And he says, "Let me tell you what's going on with me." And he sings an aria to her where he explains this story that I told before about his father having died and how he's had to take up this life of a bandit. Yes, he's a bandit. And it's an extraordinary aria. It uses this theme. Page 213. something Mexican about that. Something like a guitar strumming. Quite an aggressive guitar, but a guitar nonetheless. And this, if you go down a little bit further to page 214, you hear this incredibly painful melody. My inheritance is a group of bandits. I accepted this. I met you. Then everything changed. You've heard that melody before. He says, I didn't want to tell you about my story. I didn't want to tell you who I was for the shame of it. And that's vergogna up on the high B flat. Finally, he reveals himself. As we say in English, he's no longer the Jack the Lad, you know, the cool customer, but he's really, really desperate here. Anyway, she throws him out, but she hears a gunshot, and he comes back, and she needs to hide him, and this painful page 222, this music where she's trying to lift him up into the attic. Very interesting this, because we get E flat minor, A minor, which will become very important in Act 3. And this repeated melody, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 repetitions of that melody. Amazing. Anyway, Jack Rance comes back to interrogate her. After Ramirez has been shot, he said that the blood has led here, and he knows he's here. Anyway, we don't have a lot of time left. But,
well, you know, we don't have to. The nice thing about this flexible medium, but we don't have to stop at any particular time unless you're losing patience. But at the same time, you can't leave us quite hanging.
No, I can't leave you hanging. Well, anyway, we get the second duet between these two people, Minnie and Rance, and he's really now very, very aggressive and very angry. You love him, but he won't have you. I'm going to make sure of that. And then, and now I'm doing the Reader's Digest version of that scene, but actually what's going on is it's the greatest theater you can possibly imagine, because what's now happening is that there are blood drops coming from upstairs and coming down, and Jack Rance notices this, and you hear these blood drops. And he says, he's up there, Ella, Ella. And there's all kinds of tumultuous music. Etc., etc., etc. And then the theme comes back. Page 231. Basically, he's caught him. Ah, now I've got you all. And do you want to die by the pistol or by hanging? And so what happens? Minnie begs him to stop. And she says on page 235, as the tenor has fallen to the floor unconscious, she begs Rance to listen to her. And she says, let's play a game of poker. Again, that theme that we've heard before, this time played by the oboe. There's a certain primitiveness to this music, the use of the open fifths. This is not Baroque refinement here. This is really blood and guts, the real true verismo of the qualities of a certain school of Italian opera that dealt in really the real people, not aristocracy, and not dealing with politics, but with real people. And this is where we are. This is the musical environment we are. We should show the card scene, shouldn't we? Yes, we should. I just want to just play, before we do that, just one little harmonic innovation or a stroke of genius. After she says, if I win, if you win, you can have me and you can do whatever you want with him, with Ramirez. But if I win, this man is mine. And he says, how you love him. And his notes are very simple. This is on page 235. Come lavi, come lavi. And it's like showing him that he can't love. And I mean this by, listen to the poison of these chords. Come lavi, come lavi. It's really, Puccini really found something there. Real bile and veleno, poison. The card game. Yes, this is one of the showstoppers. As Bruno Ganz used to say, this is the $1 million scene.
Quante?
2.
Che tu l'adori. Regina.
Hai vinto! Alla mano seguente.
Quante?
Una.
Due.
Due assi e un paio.
Niente.
Pari, san pari, evviva.
Ora la decisiva.
Sì. Taia.
Renz, mi duole delle amare parole.
Carta.
Ho sempre pensato bene di voi, Jack Renz, e sempre penserò.
Io penso solamente che t'avrò fra le mie braccia. Prele, vidi, ti vinco!
Jack, che pietà! Poi che cosa sta male?
Che devo darvi?
No!
Alla bottiglia! No, ma il bicchiere dov'è?
Questo gente non chiedo che pietà!
So perché sei svenuta! La partita è perduta!
Vi sbagliate! E non gioio! Ho vinto io! 3 assi e un paio!
Buonanotte!
Goosebumps everywhere.
Well, yeah, that is probably the most successful structure in the whole piece. The second act as an entity. It's just absolutely fantastic theater. I mean, you think, I mean, like you're going back to the days of Grand Guignol, or I mean, superb melodrama. But and many people will criticize melodrama because it's somehow so manipulative. It plays on all the strings of our powers of suggestion and our sensitivities and our animal qualities, frankly, and the sensuality and all that stuff. But my God, does it work? It's just amazing. It's really amazing. Now, I have to ask you a banal question. Oh, it is already past 8 o'clock. And I'm not sure that I can go into Act 3, actually.
One of those to be continued things. Well, but perhaps it's also a tease for our participants to go figure it out by themselves. And you have something else to go to now, probably.
have something else to go to, unfortunately. I had no idea that I would be so verbose, and I apologize to everyone for that.
Oh, you were very specific, but perhaps as a summary question. So Act 3 is kind of then brings the ideas of brotherhood and humanity, and there is kind of a happy end of sorts, but
yes, there's a happy end of sorts. What happens is that finally the bandit is caught, and he will be hanged. He says to Minnie in a beautiful, he says to the crowd of the lynch mob that he doesn't want Minnie to know how he died. Just tell her that he went off to another life. Just tell her that he just abandoned her, because he'd rather she know that than the truth. But I said initially that this story was about redemption. And what did I mean by that? Well, the answer is here, that each one of us is worthy of redemption, no matter what sins we have committed, what bad acts. And that life's journey, in a way, is a road of la strada di redenzione, the road of redemption, and to try to find the right path, but to be forgiven, and to be redeemed. And this is a very, very important thing in this opera. And in fact, Minnie convinces the men by cajoling them with, well, wait a minute, I did everything for you. How could you do this? I love this man, and you must let him go. And in fact, that's what happens. I mean, it's a long, drawn out thing. And all the themes, all the melodies, especially will come back. And if I leave you with one musical example, just the one, I have to leave you with this. And it is at the end of a big ensemble where they talk about exactly this redemption. Page 329. Sorry, I got so caught up in the page number, I lost myself. Sorry. The melody of homesickness comes back. Another theme from their love duets. They say goodbye to California, and they go off into the sunset, literally. Addio mio California, and this addio, addio, addio. Happy end of sorts. They are allowed to leave, to ride off into the sunset. And that is perhaps one of the greatest cliches of the Western, is the riding off into the sunset. And there you have it. There it is.
And just a very quick or two very, very small questions, but this plot that's often criticized, people say, oh, the music's wonderful, the plot, how believable or non-believable it is. There are times that I think in Act 1 and Act 3, one has to suspend one's literary judgment more. Why do you think Puccini, do you have a guess or a feeling why Puccini is so inspired by this? Or is he just inspired literally by anything? Or is this an homage to the genre?
I think, look, there's a love triangle, and that there always has to be something like that. The triangle can be between three people, it can be between two people and an illness, like in the case of La Bohème. But he was fascinated with her. She's everything. She's it. And so maybe the infelicities of some of the story, or the crudeness of some of the story, can be forgiven. But the setting is crude. There's nothing elegant about any of it. It's of the earth. It's very basic.
That's convincing and justifies it. And one comment about the Toscanini quote, that this is the great symphonic poem. How do you interpret it? Do you find this this is driven more by the orchestra as opposed to the other Puccini operas, or?
Well, there's a motoric drive in this because of these repeated figures and the combination of repetition, hypnosis, drive, big orchestration. I'm talking really big orchestration, bigger than ever before. You get the feeling that he's painting with a much broader brush. Amazing to think that Toscanini in 1910 conducted the premiere with a cast that included Enrico Caruso, that's a name we know, Emmy Destin, a soprano, with whom Puccini was not completely convinced until he heard Gilda della Rizza sing it when it came to Italy. And Pasquale Amato was the Rance. So, but a commission by the Metropolitan Opera, American subject for an American place. And so that somebody like Toscanini would have taken such care over something like this would have been just amazing.
Incredible.
But it is a symphonic color, place. Every note conjures up some kind of image, and that's what a symphonic poem does.
Well, I want to thank you for this incredible living tour of this piece, and makes me want to hear what you think and how you think about everything that you conduct. So hopefully you can be convinced to rejoin us sometime in the fall and talk about literally any piece. And of course, there's lots of general subjects to cover about singing and music making and conducting. And incidentally, for those of you that haven't seen Tony's incredible series of masterclasses with young singers at Covent Garden on YouTube, I've been watching that instead of Netflix. There were a couple of comments from our participants. Anya Schulze wrote, Sunday's performance of Fanciulla at the Staatsoper Berlin is already sold out, and everybody who got a ticket can look forward to it. I've seen it twice. And to Mr. Pappano, thank you so much for the subscription concert with Alexander Kantor from the Staatskapelle, the Staatsoper, and the Philharmonie in Berlin as well. It was so moving, intense, and really special. And Marta Volpe wrote, so terrific. Thank you for an incredible 2 hours, very enlightening, and I have a new appreciation for this opera. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We have to let you go. For those of you that feel like, I'll play the very last couple minutes of the video that Tony was just talking about. But thank you, Tony. I hope you come back, and I hope all of you will join us for the final seminar of this season before the summer break. And that's going to be Samuel J. Kaiser next week, discussing the mental life of modernism, a new book that he has, where he talks about what happened to the sister arts of poetry, music, and the visual arts at the beginning of 20th century, where it became suddenly harder to appreciate than before, or at least required more of an explanation. And he has an idea of why that is so. He's a distinguished scholar, linguist, colleague of Noam Chomsky. I hope you'll join us on July 7. But most of all, thank you, Tony. Stay and enjoy the video if you can.
Kirill, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you. You're a dear friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well and see you soon.
Bye-bye.